This video is going to have a look at the probability games questions which come up in WJC Foundation papers. Over the last few years, they've come up in paper 1, and in my opinion, they're definitely worth learning because they can be worth anything up to about 8 to 10 marks. So all we're going to look through is a past paper question itself. I've cut and pasted basically the 3 important parts of the question. You always get the instruction at the top, a sample space to fill in a few missing blanks, and then part B, it'll always ask you about finding basically whether this game makes a profit. So, top paragraph, a lot of words there. I'd advise you to maybe take a highlighter with you or just underline. There's a lot there which isn't important, and there's about 2 things really which are vitally important for completing the question. At the top, it just explains to you what's going on. So we've got machine A, machine B. We've got these different number of balls in each of them. 4th line down, this is our first important piece of information. The score for the game is the product of these 2 numbers. So I'm going to highlight product. And then underneath it says, for example, and it works through to the score is 3 times 4. So product means multiply. Some of you may know that. If you didn't know it, you tend to be quite lucky in WJC. They often give you an example of what they're actually talking about. So 3 times 4, that gives us basically the hint that they're multiplying them together. So first part of the question for normally 1 or 2 marks is just to complete the sample space. So all I'm going to do is multiply the 2 numbers together at a time. For the first space, I'm going to do 6 times 3, which is going to be 18. Second space, I'm going to do 6 times 5, which is going to be 30, and so on. So all you do for the first part, pick out your key instruction, and then you go ahead basically and just do that for the missing spaces. Second part, part B, now this is where it gets slightly harder. You've got now another 4 sentences. I'm just going to go through first of all and highlight the key pieces of information. So first one, player wins a prize by getting a score 12 or less. So wins 12 or less. It costs 80p to play the game once. So I'm basically interested in the cost, which is 80p. The price for winning is £1.50. And then if 160 people play the game once, find the profit. So 160 people are playing. I want to basically find out right at the end if it makes a profit, and if so, how much is that profit. So the first thing I'm always going to do, using my sample space, I'm going to find the probability of actually winning this game. So I'm going to put probability brackets win equals. Now in my first sentence it says you win by getting a score 12 or less. So everywhere that I see a number which is 12 or less in my sample space, I'm going to put a circle around. All I'm going to do then is count them up. So I've got 7 green circles. So the probability of winning is 7 out of the total numbers in my sample space is 16. So it's 7 out of 16. Underneath I've written i.e. 7 out of every 16 wins. So that basically means for every 16 people who play the game, 7 of them will win. Okay, so nearly half the people who play win basically. Next step then is going to be to find if 160 people play, how many will this ratio of winning equate to. So 7 out of 16 win. I want to find how many out of 160 win. So the next part is going to be number of winners equals, well, 7 out of every 16 win, and I'm going to multiply that by 160. If I do 7 over 16 times by 160, then I get the answer of 70 people. There's a few different ways of doing this. If it's with a calculator, I'd advise you to just set it up like I have, 7 over 16 times 160, and the calculator will do the rest. If not, you can set it up as 2 equivalent fractions. 7 out of 16 equals what over 160. And if you notice, 16 has been times by 10 to get to 160. So I've got to times the top number, the 7, by 10, and I get 70 out of 160, which still means 70 people. Okay, so there's a few different ways of doing that, depending on whether you've got a calculator or not. So out of my 160, using my probability of 7 over 16, 70 people will win. Now, to find profit, what profit relies on is basically what money you've made, your sales, and what it costs you to actually run the game. Once I find them two, sales and costs, then the profit is just the difference between the two. So the first one, the sales, my sales are going to be basically what I take in. And what do I take in? Well, I take in everyone's money who's paying to actually play the game. So 160 people play, and they each pay, if we read the question, 80p. So 160 times 80p. Now again, depending on whether you've got a calculator or not to do this, will depend on how you do that actual sum. You could do 16 times 8, get the answer and add on 2 zeros. That answer would initially be in pence, so be careful. You then probably need to change it to pounds. I've just typed it in on a calculator, 160 times 0.8, and I've got the answer of £128. So sales equals £128. I also need to find basically my costs now, which is what I pay out. Costs are going to equal, well, 70 people win, and I pay each of them £1.50. So 70 people each receive £1.50. Now again, calculator, you just type it in as it is. If not, I'd probably do it as, well, if 70 people won £1 each, I'd pay out £70. If 70 people won £2 each, I'd pay out £140. So if they win £1.50, they're going to win halfway between 70 and 140, which is going to be £105. Last step then is to find now my profit. I've got my sales, I've got my costs, so now I can find my profit. So profit is going to equal the difference between what I take in, what I charge people for the game, and what I pay out, and that's basically the money I give to the people who win. So the difference between 128 and 105 is done by just doing a simple takeaway, and I'm going to get my profit of £23. So that tends to be the approach on every single one. Find out what you need to do in the sample space, fill it in. First step then, find the probability of winning. Multiply it up for the number of people who play. And then finally, for the profit, you need to work out, first of all, how much money you make, which is always going to be what people give you for playing the game. And second of all, how much it's going to cost you, which is going to be basically what you pay out. And then finally, to find the profit, it's just the difference between the two. Now, you need to make sure you are comfortable doing some of these sums without a calculator. As I said, with a calculator, it's dead easy to do. Without a calculator, you need to make sure that you can do long multiplication and that you can multiply whole numbers and decimal numbers together. Okay.